Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm an alcoholic. I am here with my friend Steve, and we have been asked to start reading in the chapter "Working with Others." We kind of figured out a little bit about how we were going to do this. I want to thank Howard and Kathy for inviting us. That's a really cool thing. Love seeing people from so many different places around the planet, all all concentrating on a common solution, which is a very, very cool thing. So anyway, before I start reading, we're gonna start reading on the page top of page 96. But I always like to put this stuff in context. If we just start reading on 96 and there's no context around it, you could be led to believe that we've got to run out and do this. Okay, there's some prerequisites really that are very helpful. The first 11 steps being some of them, that we need to have a little bit of experience with if we're going to run around and start to work with others. So I'm going to quickly bring us up to speed. We become convinced in step one that we're alcoholic and we cannot manage our own affairs. We understand that we experience the phenomenon of craving when we put alcohol in our body, and we experience the mental obsession when alcohol is not in our body. So our two problems really are when we're drinking and when we're not drinking. Other than that, we're probably okay, except for after the dash, which is that our lives have become unmanageable. Unmanageability, as it relates to the information in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, is emotional and spiritual and mental. That's the unmanageability. We're prey to misery, depression, anxiety, self-centered fear, shame, guilt, remorse, all that stuff. We can't seem to be consistent with anything. Especially when we're drinking, we drop the ball and we pull no-shows, and we let everybody down that we can let down. And there's an unmanageability to all that. But really, what our alcoholism is, when we've separated from alcohol is that unmanageability. We come to believe that. It says we concede that to our innermost self. And that's very, very important, because if you don't think you've got our problem, you're probably not going to think we've got your solution. So it's very, very important to identify, in step one. Step two is, we come to believe that there's a way out. We come to believe that there's a power, a spiritual power that we can gain access to, that's going to enable us to stay separated from alcohol and move forward and start putting the pieces of our life together. And in step three, we make a decision to do that. There's certain actions that are going to be necessary for that to happen. The big book isn't like a self-help book, where we just sit there all by ourselves and figure it out. It's about a series of actions that are going to involve other people. And in step three, we make a decision. Okay, I'm all in. I'm all in. I'm going to come all the way in. I'm going to sit all the way down, and I'm going to do my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. Step four is identifying the major causes and conditions of our failure at life up to this point. Now, it's funny, because when we look at it, it doesn't look like that's what it's going to be. It looks like, oh, resentments. Well, I don't really have a lot. Fear. I don't really have any fear. And sex conduct. I don't think that's anybody's business. We don't really understand exactly how impactful that particular inventory is going to be, but it's going to cover the majority of how we self-sabotage our quality of life. And that's really what the fourth step is going to teach us, that we are self-sabotaging, the relationships in our life, our emotional condition, everything. So we put that inventory together, and then we do what is known as a fifth step. We are entirely honest with somebody about all of this stuff. We hold nothing back. And it's probably the first time in our lives that we've really been honest. We might have had therapists for 20 years, and we've never been honest with them. Doctors for 20 years, we never really told them the truth. when we're sitting in front of a sponsor or a spiritual advisor and we're reading our 4-step, we're sitting in front of somebody that really understands, a lived experience understanding. So it could really be the first time we've been honest about our mistakes, our faults, our shortcomings, our roadblocks, and we share all of that. Then we're confronted with step 6, which is, we become willing to have God remove these defects of character. And in step 7, we humbly ask for these defects of character that we've identified in step 4 and 5 to be removed. And this is a very spiritual step. When you first look at it, it might look irresponsible. Oh, we just give everything to God, right? But let me just ask you this. Haven't you tried? Haven't you tried to be better? Haven't you tried not to do that anymore? I know, I promised, I wouldn't vomit all over the wedding, and I did it again. I know, I'm trying, if you're anything like me, it's not working. So what do? Why do we go to God? We go to God because there's nothing else. And then in step 8, we put a list of the people and the institutions together that we've harmed. We've identified this in step 4. We add to it in step 8, and we become willing to go out and make direct amends to those people and those institutions. And in step 9, we go out and we make amends to those people and those institutions. And you knock on a lot of doors. You send a lot of letters. You send a lot of emails. You hire a private detective to find somebody. You get on a plane and go to Oshkosh because you owe a couple of amends there. You actually take this as a piece of work. Amends are not extra credit. They're part of this program, and we take that seriously. Now, it says before we're halfway through with the amends. That's really the 9-step promises that I think everybody's familiar with. By this time, we are fully embedded into a spiritual experience, a change of personality. And with that, we move into step 10, which I see step 10 as a practicing these principles in all my affairs step. That's really what I see. If I need to continue to make inventory, I do it. If I continue to need to talk to somebody about, what I've discovered, I do it. I continue to make amends when I've caused harm. I continue to pray. I continue to, do all the things that I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous in real time, and that's really step 10. And then in step 11, I seek through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God. The spiritual life isn't a theory. It's something that we have to practice as a discipline. So there's upon awakening, there's as I move through the day, there's the evening review. I'm sure Howard has covered all that stuff in prior weeks. And those are to be used as a way of life. They are also not extra credit, the prayer and the meditation. They're part of working a program. If you want to be one of the rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. Thoroughly following our path is doing those steps, those 11 steps. And if we do that, there's an organic change that happens. And that organic change is we develop a service ethic. It becomes second nature for us to reach out and try to help other people who are suffering from alcoholism, drug dependence, whatever. We start to make ourselves available in a myriad of ways, and we start to develop this service ethic in our life. And this brings us to step 12. You do the first 11 steps. You're not going to be able to stop me from working with other people. It's going to be the absolute next thing that we're going to do. And now, I'd like to ask Steve to start doing the reading and start some of the breakdown on page 96.
All right, thanks, Chris. I'm Steve, alcoholic, and I'll be reading from the very top of page 96. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. If you are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with its first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. So I'll just comment on that because there's a lot there. Um, Searching out another alcoholic for me personally is simple. I go to a Thursday night open speakers meeting and there's a room full of people. Some just out of treatment, some there for the first time, some there coming back. So to search them out, it doesn't require a whole lot of effort on my part. But when this was written, obviously, it wasn't easy to find somebody. And Bill and Bob went to great lengths to find people. As far as somebody not really wanting to do the work, I had a gentleman who, after 8 years in sobriety, he needed help. He wanted to get better, and he asked me to be his sponsor, and I said yes. And I said we'll start going through the book from the beginning. We hit the third step. I said this requires us to get on our knees and say the third step prayer together. It was the last time I saw him after that meeting. If he comes back, great. If he asks me to work with him again, great. But I can't chase him like this says. And I've had many occasions where people ask me to be a sponsor, but they flake out. So the guys that I do have, I do my utmost to be available. Suppose now you are making your second visit to a man. He has read this volume and says he's prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. Having had that experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. Let him know you are available if he wishes to make a decision and tell his story, but do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult someone else. Here comes the good part. He may be broke and homeless. If he is, you might try to help him about getting a job or give him a little financial assistance. But you should not deprive your family or creditors of money they should have. Perhaps you will want to take the man into your home for a few days, but be sure you use discretion. Be certain he will be welcomed by your family and that he's not trying to impose upon you for money, connections, or shelter. Permit that, and you can only harm him. You will be making it possible for him to be insincere. You may be aiding in his destruction rather than his recovery. So here's another situation that we don't really need to do like they did back in the day. We have treatment centers. We have homeless shelters. We have a host of different places we can direct this person to. I took this in a slightly different context, and I invited people to my home. Come on over for dinner. Come on over for a picnic. And I used discretion. And they were welcomed with open arms to our family. We'd have a picnic, we'd have dinner, we'd watch movies, whatever the case may be, to help them see sobriety is not just not drinking, it's living life. Yeah, the money thing, no. I learned that lesson real early on. So this part about harming somebody, that resonates with me a little bit with Al-Anon's philosophy of boundaries and enabling. I've given guys jobs. I've given them rides. I've bought them dinner, that kind of stuff. But I don't want to enable him. I don't want to do his fourth step for him. That's not my job. And if I do that, I'm enabling him, and he, as it says, may become insincere and just take advantage of the situation. That's it for now. So,
Right. You know, just before I get started reading, um, the information in this chapter, it kind of looks outdated. Oh man, that's pretty hardcore the way those guys had to do it, back during World War One. But the fact of the matter is a lot of these principles that you find in this chapter are very guiding and very appropriate in certain situations and work really well. I'll just share a couple of things. My anonymity, I really try to keep my last name or my picture out of things that are in press, radio, TV, film, whatever. I really try to follow those traditions, but I don't at work. I go into whatever job I'm at, and I go right to HR and I tell them, look, I'm in long-term recovery from alcoholism, and one of the things I do is, I help people, and that goes out in newsletters or whatever, right? And I've had the opportunity to help a number of people in my job. One woman came and said, my daughter's a mess, she's ODing, blah blah blah. So we go out to Friendlies. I have a half an hour conversation with her. She goes to treatment. She follows up with a strong AA program, and she's sober 2.5 years now. There was a woman at work who was I work in a hospital like environment. She's like pinching the drugs, which is you really don't do that, right? And this one day she locked herself in the bathroom for like 6 hours while she was out of her. We had to fire her, and they asked me to drive her home because we wouldn't let her drive home. She's out of her mind, right? So I'm driving her home, and I have maybe a 20-minute conversation with her. She gets sober very soon afterward, and she just celebrated 1.5 years. Now we can be effective where other people can't. We can be effective, and it's been my experience that my time is very valuable. The things that Steve read, we're trying not to waste time on people who are trying to waste our time. Yeah. And if somebody is unwilling to go through the steps with you, and you hang on and you keep trying and you keep spending a ton of time with them, the book is saying you're not appropriately allocating your time. You're supposed to find people who are going to be willing to take the step, do the step work with you, because people could die because you're wasting your time on Harry half measure. You know what I mean? So there's some really, really good principles in here. I'm going to start reading at the top of page 97, and I'm going to dedicate this little piece to a friend of ours that just passed. His name was Gordon. And probably some people on this meeting know who Gordon was. Gordon had the open lounge Zoom, and got great speakers. He was from India and London. And one time Gordon was giving me a hard time. He wanted me to speak at his meeting, and he jumped in. It was like 100 people on Zoom before the meeting, and he's like jumping in. Chris, I want you to speak. It was kind of inappropriate, right? So finally I'm like, Gordon, take it offline. So sure enough, the next meeting he's doing the same thing. He's like, Chris, you got to give me a topic. You got to give me a topic. I'm like, I get frustrated, right? So I go, okay, here's your topic. Bill did the 12 steps, he did the 12 traditions, he did the 12 concepts. Well, they've just discovered some writings of his that have kind of been hidden away for a while, and they're the 12 inconveniences. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give a talk on the 12 inconveniences. I was just giving him a hard time, right? About a week later, all of a sudden I see the flyer, Chris S., the 12 inconveniences. Now I'm stuck. I don't want to look bad, I don't want to I don't want to, I don't want to go, I don't want to show up and not have something to share. Like I was only kidding with the 12. So I had to find the 12 inconveniences. And guess where I found them? I found them on page 97. You may be aiding his destruction rather than his recovery, it says, if you're enabling him. Then it says, never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you're doing the right thing if you assume them. Now, this is the inconvenience that we sign up for as recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous. These are the inconveniences. Helping others is a foundation stone of your recovery, but kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You have to act a good Samaritan every day if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep and great interference with your pleasures. I can't tell you how many times I go to bed early. I go to bed like 9:30 at night because I'm up at like 4:30. And that doesn't mean newer people, do the same thing. So I get phone calls. I get people knocking on the door. I get emails and Facebook messages, and I've got to respond to these. Interruptions to your business. So I always let the people I work with know that I've got an unorthodox life. I may have to take phone calls, personal phone calls during business. Yes, I may have to do that. I may even have to leave the building. Now, you need to understand that this is part of my life, and I will never rob you of time. I will make that time up one way or another. I'm gonna give you a dime for your nickel, but I've got an unorthodox life because I've got to respond to these things. It may mean sharing your money and your home. I've done that. Every once in a while, I share my money. I don't give a lot of money to newcomers. Steve does. Steve gives a lot of money to newcomers. He'll put his email address in after the meeting for anybody that might need a grub steak. But I've definitely had people live at my house for periods of time, and like Steve, come over to the house. Counseling frantic wives and relatives. I was on the phone today with two relatives of a woman who has cut their family off. She is self-medicated. She's got behavioral health issues, and she's self-medicated with marijuana and cocaine and booze and drugs, and she's a mess, and everybody's freaking out. And I was on the phone with two of the family members today, just kind of telling them what's going on and what kind of an opportunity to look for where you might be able to be of help, and what works, what doesn't work, confronting somebody. And I spent about an hour on the phone with the frantic relatives. Innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. Instead of the sanitariums and asylums, it's treatment centers and detoxes today. But I can't tell you how many times I've gone to visit somebody or take a meeting into a facility. I testified for one of my friends in Superior Court in Trenton, New Jersey. Superior Court judge. I got up there and I was a character reference for this guy, and I don't do that for everybody, but this guy was a good AA. You know what I mean? Working with others, starting home groups, busy AA. And he deserved it, and so I did that. Your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. Your wife may sometimes say that she is neglected. My wife right now is in the other room watching her favorite football team with the door closed, and this really is, an inconvenience not only for her, but it's her favorite team, and she's got to be quiet. She can't jump up and yell. So a drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. I've had my life threatened in 12-step calls. I've had cars stolen, and it's the firing line of life. And if we stay in that firing line, helping others with good motives, God keeps us protected. I've never been shot. I've never been run over, and I've gone to crack dens and all kinds of places on 12-step calls, and I remain unscathed. So I believe the promises. You may have to fight with him if he is violent. So this is saying you may have to fight with an alcoholic if an alcoholic gets violent while you're trying to carry the message. So what I do is I always ask my sponsees to take some martial arts, and why do I do that? Because some people need a meeting, some people need a beating. And if you do enough of this work, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right, Steve? I hope you know I'm kidding. Anyway, I've never, never had to beat anybody, which is another good thing. Sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. This is another one that I do. I'm not a sedative administrator anymore. I had a couple of bad incidents back in the 70s being the sedative administrator, and I passed that responsibility on to the clinical people. Thank you. You know what I mean? Some people absolutely need medical supervision. So always try to understand that if somebody is in convulsions or just as high strung as you've ever seen anybody, understand that medical surveillance and detoxification is something that could save their life. And not getting it, they could die. So sedatives may have to be administered. I just don't do that myself anymore. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. I've certainly done that. Occasionally you will have to meet those conditions. So those are the 12 inconveniences. And I can check off most of those as something that happens to me within a year. I'm covering, 11 out of 12 of those inconveniences. And that's part and parcel of the gift we get to be able to carry the message back to alcoholics who are still sick and still suffering. And like Steve said, a lot of times this does happen in meetings. A lot of times it does happen in meetings. A lot of mine doesn't because my phone number's everywhere, and I get phone calls from all over the place, and it's not directly AA related, but you want to find a still sick and suffering alcoholic, go to an open discussion meeting. That's all you need to do. There'll be a bevy of them there. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Steve.
We seldom allow an alcoholic to live in our homes for a long at a time. It is not good for him, and it sometimes creates serious complications in the family. You think? Though an alcoholic does not respond, there is no reason why you should neglect his family. You should continue to be friendly to them. The family should be offered your way of life. Should they accept and practice spiritual principles, there's a much better chance that the head of the family will recover. And even though he continues to drink, the family will find life more bearable. We had this guy, I'm thinking 3-4 years ago, who was very devout in his Christian faith. He could recite Bible verses. He could recite the doctrine, the catechism. Very, very, very religious, very knowledgeable. And he showed up on our doorstep. And he could not or would not completely give himself to this simple program. He was stuck with this concept of a higher power. So what had happened is I stayed close to talking with his wife, and at one point with his daughter. They both needed help and guidance. And I invited them to look at this literature, this book especially, to see what the father or husband was up against, but also, more importantly, the solution. And they were able to grasp onto it a little bit, and I'm sure it helped them through. He died. He died of acute liver failure, and I helped clean out his apartment. And I got to tell you, it was heartbreaking. I mean, this is a guy I went to church with. I helped him come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He just wasn't having it. And it's sad to think about the family he left behind. But I was glad that I was able to interact with his family, because that's what we do. Though an alcoholic does not respond, there should be, I read that. For the type of alcoholic is able and willing to get well, little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it is not. So just real quickly, and I think it refers back to what I read earlier, but I'll give my number out to people and we'll exchange numbers, young or new guys primarily. And I'll say, give me a call. And of course, I don't hear from them. And on the second, maybe third day, I'll shoot a text over, or I may just call. Just checking in, see how you like the meeting. You planning on coming back, that sort of thing. I have a phrase for that. I call it priming the pump. I remember how terrified I was, terrified to go to my first meeting, my second meeting, my third meeting. I was terrified. I was scared at 2 years in. I was anxious and nervous from 3 to 15. I was mildly anxious after 15. It wasn't until another 10 years later that I really just became very comfortable walking into a meeting, whether I knew anybody or blind when I was on the road to a brand new meeting where I didn't know anybody. It took me that long to overcome my fear. So I do feel for the guy that has my number but doesn't call. Okay. It's not a matter of giving that isn't question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely on our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Best line in the big book that Bill wrote. Best sentence. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife. We simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence upon God. Before I read this next sentence, I just listen to this word that Bill uses to describe what he's telling. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trusts God and clean house. So when I think of that line of burn into the consciousness, I think of when they brand cattle, and they burn their brand right into the rump of the cattle. What this means to me is I have to take that branding iron and burn it into my brain, and that would hurt. But he's not mincing words here. That, because my wife still drinks or my kids are unruly, or any excuse we use that we can't stop unless that changes is is nonsense. He said it. I don't know if you want me to keep reading, but I do want to jump back to something that I actually grabbed my eye. It was the term being the Good Samaritan, and it was up here anyway. Anyway, what is a Good Samaritan? I had to look that up. I mean, I know it's a Bible verse and all of that, that's fine. But I wanted to know what it really meant. Selfless compassion that goes against social and religious norms of the time. So here's an example. Selfless compassion. There was a guy that used to come to our meeting. He was, what did you call it? Mental health issues, physical weight issue. He wasn't captain of the football team. He wasn't dating the head cheerleader. And he'd come to the meeting and he'd share the same thing every week. And I'm trying, and I'm this and that. And it was difficult. You know, I didn't want to interact with the guy. I'm going to be honest, but that's not what we do. You know, there are no ranks, there are no better thans or any of that in our fellowship. We're all equal. We're all survivors of that shipwreck. So I had a gathering at the house and I invited him over. And, you know, several people commented, like, what's he doing here? And I just said, he's, you know, he's part of our gang. So he's invited. And I hope it went a short way, a long way. I just hope he recognized that we're all in this together and he's welcome in my home uh, with my friends and family. And that's what a good Samaritan is. And then the other definition is a good Samaritan is a citizen who comes to the aid of another person. And that's a 12-step call. That's what we do. We come to the aid. We show them the tools. We talk them through it. We pray with them. We help them in any way we can. And it kind of matches that definition that I read of a good Samaritan. But it says that we have to play that every day. And it's not necessarily always with an alcoholic.
You know, if your life isn't inconvenienced by some of this stuff, you're doing it wrong. You know, also if your life isn't positively impacted by all this stuff, you're doing it wrong. You know, I want to talk a little bit about the historical importance of this 12-step venture that we engage upon after we've done the first 11 steps. All right, so go back to the first days of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, a handful of people get sober and they're carrying the message to other people. There's some you know, there's some publicity. Liberty Magazine, Saturday Evening Post. There's some publicity that really supercharges the fellowship. But in 1939, there was about 60 or 70 people. 1940, there was about 250 people. 1941, there was about 2,000 people. 1943, there was 10,000 people. 1944, there was like 60,000 people. There was exponential growth. You can see this in the forwards. There was exponential growth, and I know why that is. People were requesting help, and people in Alcoholics Anonymous were responding to those requests for help, and they were out there. They were out there making themselves available. I want to tell another story. So I'm a couple years sober. This is like 1991 or something, right? And this guy was in my group. His name was Foster, and Foster had gotten sober in 1958. And I thought this was really cool, you know. So Foster invites me over to his home. I was doing side electrical work. Then I was hanging a paddle fan for him or something. Hopefully, it didn't come crashing down on his head while he was eating. I wasn't a very good electrician. Anyway, you know, I'm over there, and I come to the conclusion that really he doesn't care about the ceiling fan. He's doing a 12-step number on me. I'm sober a year and a half or something. It's the first time somebody qualified me as an alcoholic. He's talking about his obsession of the mind. He's talking about his allergy to the body. He's talking about his unmanageability. He's painting a picture of his alcoholism. And then he's letting me identify and talk about, yeah, you know, that happened to me. And this is kind of how that happened to me. And you know, for an hour and a half or so, we had a really great conversation, and we identified with each other. You know, we've got a common problem and hopefully a common solution. Now, I asked him a question because I was really interested. He grew up in my hometown. He went to meetings in my hometown when I was 3 years old. I wanted to know what that was like. So I go, Foster, you know, what was it like back there in AA, you know, in 1958? He goes, oh, well, you know, we had a meeting in Burnsville, but we got a resentment. So we ended up over in Myersville, you know, so here we are in Myersville. There's about 6 or 8 of us, right? And we had a meeting on Friday night. I go, well, what else did you do? He goes, oh, we went a lot of 12-step calls. I go, tell me a little bit about that. Well, she goes, Monday, we'd get, our phone number was everywhere. So, Monday we'd have a couple of people to go see. Tuesday we'd go down to the hospital. Thursday was court, it was municipal court night. So we would go there and we would see if we could find somebody that had a DUI so this is what he would do. They would go to a meeting one time a week and they'll go on about 4 12-step calls for the rest of the week. So the amount of time you and I put into AA meetings today, that was spent on the road by these guys. They took it on the road. And listen, they never expected to ever get anybody sober. Maybe 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 people would end up in the AA group. But that's not why they did it. They did it because it was the 12-step discipline that they asked you to do in this book. And you have to understand that between 1958 and 1968, Alcoholics Anonymous more than doubled in size. And by the time 1990 or something came around, we're not doing the 12-step calls anymore because there's so many treatment centers and detoxes and all that. We're not doing the 12-step calls anymore. So guess what? We're not growing anymore either. Alcoholics Anonymous hasn't grown in 35 years. We hover around 2 million, 3 million people. And I think it's a direct result of not paying attention to what truly is our obligation in this 12-step environment. And this chapter is a call to action. This chapter is a call to action, telling us to get out of the house. You know what I mean? Get out of the house. Go carry the message some way, somehow, grab a bunch of people. Steve and I, we've got a great saying. You know what that saying is? Get in the car. Get in the car, and we'll roll somewhere, and we'll do something. So again, take this chapter as a call to action. I'm done for the night. You got anything, Steve?
No, that's
All right. We're probably ending a little early, but that just gives more time for people to share and ask questions that we probably will struggle to answer. Anyway, that's all.
Let me just